Imagine a colony so wealthy it was called the Pearl of the Caribbean, yet behind that glittering facade, 500,000 people were living in chains. Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, produced sugar, coffee, and cotton for Europe, but at a horrifying cost. Brutal conditions where enslaved men and women were treated as disposable. No one expected them to rise up. No one believed they could win. But in 1791, the unthinkable happened. The most oppressed people on earth launched a rebellion that would shock empires, topple armies, and forever change the history of slavery. The Pearl of the Caribbean's dark secret. By the late 1700s, Saint-Domingue was the crown jewel of France's empire. Its fertile soil churned out sugar, coffee, and cotton that made European merchants unimaginably rich. But beneath the wealth was a system of cruelty, so extreme it shocked even other colonists in the Caribbean. Nearly 500,000 enslaved Africans toiled under a regime of endless labor, savage punishments, and no hope of freedom. The ratio was staggering: 10 enslaved people for every white colonist. Owners knew they were outnumbered, so they used terror to maintain control. Whippings, mutilations, and executions designed to break the human spirit. Yet whispers of resistance never disappeared. Small revolts flickered through the 1700s, crushed brutally each time. But the fear never left the plantation owners' minds. What if one day the enslaved united? The spark of revolution. For years the enslaved were kept deliberately in the dark. News, books, even the idea of equality was censored out of their reach. But in 1789, a storm broke across the Atlantic. The French Revolution erupted, and with it came whispers of liberty, equality, and the rights of man. Despite every effort to silence them, the enslaved of Saint-Domingue heard the message. If all men were created equal, didn't that include them? Secret meetings began to spread through the colony. More than 200 leaders formed underground networks, planning something greater than anyone thought possible. They studied, they prepared, they waited. Then in August 1791, the spark finally caught fire. The northern province exploded in violence. Plantations burned across the countryside. Groups of enslaved men and women marched in the night, cutting down overseers and sending terrified colonists fleeing for their lives. Within 48 hours, most of the plantations in the north lay in ashes. The colonists had underestimated them, and suddenly the most oppressed people in the world held the upper hand. Why this revolt succeeded most slave uprisings in history ended in tragedy. They were crushed quickly, leaving only punishment and despair in their wake. But Haiti was different. The revolutionaries weren't just angry, they were organized. Years of secret planning had given them structure, leaders, and strategies that went far beyond chaos. They fought with whatever weapons they could find: machetes, farming tools, even fire itself. But their greatest weapon was surprise. Guerrilla warfare, night attacks, and hit-and-run raids baffled the French troops, who were trained for traditional battles, not jungle ambushes. And while the enslaved outnumbered their oppressors 10 to 1, the colonists never believed they could act together on such a scale. That arrogance proved fatal. Meanwhile, France itself was unraveling in the throes of its own revolution. The chaos back in Europe meant fewer reinforcements, less coordination, and more opportunities for the rebels to press their advantage. Plantation owners who once saw themselves as untouchable suddenly faced the terrifying truth. Their wealth, their status, and their power could vanish overnight. The rebellion was no longer a flicker of resistance. It was a firestorm that couldn't be put out. And from the flames, a leader would rise who would change everything. Toussaint Louverture's rise. Amid the chaos, one figure began to stand out: Toussaint Louverture. Born into slavery but freed in his mid-30s, he was brilliant, disciplined, and deeply strategic. While others saw only chaos, Louverture saw opportunity. By 1794, he had united scattered rebel groups under his command, transforming a desperate uprising into a disciplined army. Louverture wasn't just a fighter. He was a tactician who studied European warfare and adapted it to the mountains and jungles of Saint-Domingue. Guerrilla raids, ambushes, coordinated strikes. His forces moved like shadows, striking where the French least expected. Soon they weren't just surviving, they were winning. When Britain and Spain joined the struggle, hoping to snatch the colony from France, Louverture played them all like a master chess player. At first, he fought alongside Spain to push back the French. But when the French offered emancipation to the enslaved, Louverture switched allegiance, rallying his forces under the tricolor flag, not out of loyalty to France, but to secure freedom for his people. By 1795, Louverture had become so powerful that even French officials relied on on him. He saved the governor-general's life, was promoted to lieutenant governor himself, and commanded the loyalty of thousands. Yet Louverture's loyalty to France was always conditional. He wasn't fighting for an empire. He was fighting for a vision, a Saint-Domingue where slavery would never return. But France had its own plans, and they were about to clash violently with his. Betrayal and bloodshed. For a moment it seemed Toussaint Louverture had secured the dream. Emancipation was spreading, and France, desperate to hold its empire together, granted freedom to the enslaved. But in Paris, whispers of betrayal grew louder. Could France really allow a black general to control its richest colony? And worse, could they tolerate a colony of free men where once there had only been slaves? By 1801, the French had ended their wars in Europe and were ready to turn their gaze back to Saint-Domingue. Napoleon Bonaparte, determined to restore order and the profits of slavery, sent a massive expedition to crush Louverture. At first, the French played their cards carefully, promising prosperity and peace. But the revolutionaries soon uncovered the truth. Paris intended to bring back chains. In 1802, Louverture was betrayed, captured, and shipped to France, where he died in a cold prison cell. Many believed the revolution would collapse without him. Instead, his capture only ignited a new fire. Out of the shadows stepped Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Louverture's fiercest general, a man with no interest in compromise. Dessalines unleashed a campaign of brutal vengeance. He argued that if the French had drenched the island in blood, then blood must answer blood. Plantations were burned, colonists hunted down, and massacres sent shockwaves through the Atlantic world. Napoleon, bleeding soldiers and money, soon realized this war was unwinnable. By 1803, his exhausted forces withdrew in defeat, leaving Saint-Domingue in the hands of the very people they had once enslaved. But independence would come at a cost, one that Haiti would carry for centuries. Independence and fallout. On January 1st, 1804, Jean-Jacques Dessalines stood before a newly freed people and declared the birth of Haiti, the first black republic in the world, and the only nation ever created by a successful slave revolt. Slavery was abolished forever, and for the first time, those who had been treated as property claimed their destiny as citizens of a free nation. But freedom came wrapped in fire. Dessalines, determined to make sure slavery could never return, ordered the expulsion, and in many cases, the massacre of the remaining European colonists. Haiti was now free, but it was also isolated. Terrified by the example, Western powers refused to recognize the new nation. France, Britain, Spain, and the United States all turned their backs, afraid that Haiti's revolution might inspire their own enslaved populations to rise. Without allies or trade partners, Haiti struggled. Its plantations lay in ruins, its economy collapsed, and its people faced years of poverty and instability. And under Dessalines' harsh military rule, freedom didn't always feel like liberation. Haiti had thrown off its chains, but the world made sure those chains were replaced with isolation. Still, the victory was undeniable. Against all odds, the enslaved had defeated Napoleon, shattered an empire's grip, and created a nation that stood as living proof that freedom could be taken, even from the strongest powers on earth. Global shockwaves. The Haitian Revolution didn't just transform one island. It terrified the world. Across the Americas, slaveholding nations watched in horror. If enslaved people in Saint-Domingue could overthrow their masters, what would stop the same from happening in Jamaica, Cuba, or the American South? For years, governments refused to even acknowledge Haiti's independence. The United States, built on slavery, ignored the new republic for decades. France eventually demanded crippling reparations in exchange for recognition, plunging Haiti into debt that haunted it for over a century. The message from the great powers was clear. Freedom would not come without punishment, and yet the revolution's influence could not be contained. Abolitionists pointed to Haiti as proof that enslaved people were not helpless. They were capable of strategy, sacrifice, and victory. The French, the British, and even the Americans were forced to confront their own hypocrisy. How could they preach liberty while denying it to millions? Haiti became both a beacon of hope and a warning. For the enslaved, it was proof that resistance was not only possible, but unstoppable. For the slaveholders, it was their worst nightmare, a living reminder that the oppressed would not remain silent forever. Conclusion. The story of the Haitian Revolution is more than a chapter in history. It's a powerful reminder that real freedom can erupt from the unlikeliest places. From the plantations of Saint-Domingue came a force that toppled empires, overthrew oppressors, and declared independence in the face of overwhelming odds. Against the might height of Napoleon's army, unrelenting brutality, and global isolation, Haiti endured and triumphed. But the victory came at a steep price. Haiti's leaders fought not only for liberation, but for survival in a world determined to forget them. The new nation's isolation, debt, and internal struggles couldn't erase what had been achieved. An entire people rising, united by determination and a vision of liberty. That collective will shattered chains and changed the world. So what does that mean for us today? It's a reminder that courage, when combined with planning and unyielding resolve, can topple the most entrenched powers. And it asks us to consider what stories of resistance are still being ignored, whose voices still need to be heard. In the end, Haiti's revolution wasn't just a revolt, it was a reckoning, a warning, a spark, and a beacon rolled into one. And its reverberations continue to challenge us, urging us to believe that freedom, once taken, cannot be undone. And that's the story of the Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave uprising in history, and one that still shakes the world today. If you found this story as powerful as I did, don't let it stop here. Hit that like button, subscribe for more untold histories, and drop a comment below. What surprised you most about Haiti's fight for freedom? Your support helps bring more hidden stories to light, and trust me, there are plenty more shocking chapters of history you've never heard before. So stick around, because the next one might just change the way you see the world.